We want to talk about how to keep intercessors from losing their fire. How to keep intercessors from losing their fire. Or another way to say that is how to keep intercessors from burning out. How to keep intercessors from burning out. We know that weariness loves to attack intercessors. That spirit of weariness loves to attack intercessors. But Leviticus 6:13, Leviticus 6:13, Leviticus 6:13 says, "The fire shall ever be burning upon the altar. It shall never go out." That means in our prayer hubs, we cannot let the fire go out. So how do we keep that from happening? It's a real issue that every prayer hub leader will have to face at some point. So we want to get ahead of that. Now, the man of God who asked about this, they're running prayer meetings 6 days a week for 3 or 4 hours at a time. So I can see why some people's fire would go out because they have not maybe done some of these things that I'm going to share. So the first thing we do with regard to keeping intercessors from losing their fire or keeping intercessors from burning out is we have to understand what is putting out their fire. We have to understand what is burning them out. Sometimes intercessors will take on assignments that you've not called them to take on. Like, in other words, they're under your prayer hub covering and they're so motivated and so on fire, but they step out into territory that you've not commissioned them to step out into, and there's no grace for it. Listen, where there's grace for something, you might get weary, but you won't get burned out to the point that you don't want to do it anymore. You have to learn how to discern whether the intercessor has stepped beyond their grace or whether they're just under attack. Because you might hear an intercessor say, well, there's no grace on me to join your meeting anymore. Well, is that true? Is there really no more grace? Did God lift the grace for them to be part of your prayer hub? Or is the enemy attacking them with weariness? So we have to discern that. And we have to pray. We have to discern that. We have to ask them questions. Well, what do you mean? Well, why do you think you're burning out? Maybe they're going through a trial. Maybe they're just going through heavy warfare. But unless you talk to them, you find a prayer hub leader that does a prayer hub a member who doesn't show up several weeks and they've been with you for a long time. Now, it's the same with the church. They're not there. They're there. So they're not there. They don't contact you. They don't come the next week or the next month. They don't contact you. You've got to be proactive and reach out and ask them, what are you going through something? Are you under spiritual warfare? What is happening? Ask questions, find out what is putting their fire out or what is burning them out. Maybe it's a health issue or some other issue in their life where they're just stretched so thin, they can't even think straight. So at some level, you have to serve as a minister to these people. Leaders are really ministers, and you have to help them at some level. Now, you're not their pastor, and you don't want to overstep the bounds of their pastor. Be very careful about that. You really do. But we all are called to minister to one another, love one another, honor one another, carry each other's burdens, as Hebrews says. And so we want to help them address these challenges in their life so that they can keep the fire burning. We don't want to see the devil take them out, right? We don't want to see the enemy waylay them. We don't want to see the enemy, burn them out to where they don't even want to pray anymore. So first you have to find out what is putting out their fire. Are you putting too much pressure on them? Are you having too many prayer meetings? So we'll get into that in a minute. The second thing you need to do if their fire is burning out is stoke the fire. You got to stoke the fire. You ever been camping and the fire's about to go out? What do? You take a stick and you start you start stoking the fire. Maybe you put a little more wood on there, or a little more leaves on there, something to get it going again. In other words, you got to fill them back up. You got to keep them full. That's why a short teaching is really good. At the beginning of a prayer meeting, you're investing or you're sowing back into them. You want to pray for them. Sometimes if you know that they're going through a trial, you want to do it right there on the prayer broadcast. Let everybody pray for them. Have the whole prayer hub group pray for them. And if it's you and one other, you pray for them. Stoke the fire. Break the weariness off. Break the attack that's on their mind that's telling them they should quit your prayer hub. Because God doesn't call people just to suddenly stop doing something without explanation. That's not God. That's the enemy. So find out what it is that is putting out their fire, and then stoke the fire. Try to get their fire going again. Number 3, the next thing you want to do is if someone feels overburdened in the prayer group, you don't want them to quit. You want to rotate responsibilities. So many of our prayer hubs meet once a month. Some of them meet once a week. Some of them meet 3 times a week. Some of them meet 6 times a week. Okay. So all of our prayer hubs are meeting at different frequencies. However, if you're meeting a lot, then you may want to, as a preventative measure, rotate responsibility. So the burden is not always on the same people. I mentioned at one point that at Awakening House of Prayer on our Monday nights, we rotate the leadership so that the same person doesn't have to be there necessarily every week. They can go every week if they want on Mondays, but if they don't feel like it, if they have a family event, if they need to rest, if there's other things going on, if they're feeling like they need to be alone with the Lord, then somebody else is leading the meeting that week. And so sometimes you have to rotate responsibility. So the burden is not always on the same 5 people. And anything that you start in the Lord is always, sometimes it's just you, sometimes it's 3 people. So sometimes you have to rotate responsibility. Okay, you lead this week, I'll lead that. We're all going to be here, but you take the lead at least. The fourth thing we need to do is sometimes when our fire seems to be waning, when that fire seems to be dwindling down, sometimes you just need to tell somebody, okay, just rest. Just take this week off. Just take these next couple meetings off and just go rest. Sometimes it's not, listen, it's not that the prayer meeting is necessarily burning them out. Sometimes it's just life that's burning them out. And the prayer meeting is one more thing. Now, they might tell you, look, yes, I am burning out, but I don't want to stop praying. It's my job that's burning me out, and prayer refreshes me. So you give them that option. You don't want to sit them down like they're being punished, because people who are such high achievers and so on fire, when their fire starts to wane, they don't want to feel like they're being punished for it. So you offer them the opportunity and you say, if you need to take a break this week, take a break. We'll see you next week. It's okay. Everybody needs to take a breath sometimes, right? And so you give them that option where you're not sitting there and saying, hey, you know what? I see you're burned out. Just go, just don't do it. No, that's not the spirit of it. The spirit of it is, hey, I know you got a lot going on. You've mentioned to me that, your daughter has a recital this week. Your son's birthday is next week, and you had to go to the doctor 3 times this past week. And I know you got a lot. If you need to rest this week, so maybe you're sensing their fire's going. If you need to rest this week, no problem. We've got this all covered. Join us back next week. I'll check on you. If you need something, let me know. That's the appropriate way to handle that, so that people don't feel like you're pushing them out, because the devil will make them think that you're pushing them out, and you don't want that. And then I've mentioned this in other teachings at some point, but you have to help them remember the why. You have to help them remember that why are we doing this? Because when you know the why, it instills in you it's like something is larger than yourself. So why are we praying? Well, we're contending for revival in our city. We're contending for the will of God in our city. We're pushing back darkness in our city. And your prayer hub, each one of you in different cities, different nations, will have a different flavor. So our overarching why is because we want to see God's kingdom come, his will be done on earth as is in heaven. We want to see a great awakening. We want to see the billion soul harvest. That's our big why. But you might have a smaller why in your city. Yes, we have the big why, but maybe in your city, the why is because there is a temple from another religion trying to move in, buy a big plot of land and open a huge sanctuary. And that that's going to cause a great heaviness in your city. So maybe your why for this season is praying that away and praying that out of your city. That happened in Orlando. A certain temple was built by a certain false religion. And man, nobody wanted it there, but it brought so much money that the city council wanted it because they were going to get so much tax. But so maybe that's your why right now. So you have assignments within our larger umbrella. Remember the why, because we don't want these Satanists, putting the statue up in our city or whatever it is. So that will motivate people, will give people fuel and fire, even when they're feeling tired, to know that this is bigger than us. This is the will of the Lord. And then they can believe for the grace and receive the grace to do what they're called to do. Because when they forget the why, sometimes they stop receiving the grace because they just shut down and shut off. So those are some ways to keep the fire burning among people in your prayer group. You want to figure out what puts out the fire, what's putting out their fire, why are they so weary? You want to try to alleviate that weariness. If you can do something, if you can pray for them, do that. You want to stoke the fire. You want to teach them, pray for them, let them know that you care. You want to rotate responsibilities. If they're carrying too much weight in your prayer hub, say, you know what, we're gonna take a little bit of this off you. We're going to spread this around. We want to let them rest if they need rest. And we want to remember the big why.